Thank you very much for the introduction. Um, does anyone ever like hearing their own bio? It always makes me cringe. But anyway, here we go. Um, so thank you for the introduction. Thanks to Ola, thanks to Nura, and thanks to Femi for the invitation. Um, yeah, I've been waiting for some time to be able to kind of share this work with you. It's a ongoing research. Um, and so it's on. I mean, this is how I characterize it. It's on the genealogy of Freetown's urbanization. And I'm looking at its outward growth and attendant consumption. So like through the lens of what is the material extractions. And this research is extended into the artisanal sand mining at a beach called John O'Bay, and it's located on the coast of Freetown's urban peninsula. And I first encountered this particular site as a pedestrian and as a tourist at the weekend at this beach, walking along the coastal edge of Freetown. And I'd lived there between 2013 and 2017, so I'd seen the kind of emergence of this sand mine. And then so I went back and I revisited with Edward Lawrenson, whom I made the project with in 2022. And so this research is connected to a larger body of work that I've named Sullivan Drift, and it's a series of visual pieces developed with Edward, who's at UCL, and it's combining moving images and models to foster dialogues between these colonial archives in Liverpool and London, and the realities of the people in these artisanal minings across Freetown. So the first part of the project, as Tyvad had mentioned, is in Reba right now. It's closing on Sunday. And so later on, Edward and I will return at 4 p.m. to kind of screen the film there, but it's an actual extended version of it, so there'll be a bit added to it. So this research is kind of provisional, and it's me trying to kind of make sense and piece together kind of parts of previous research and observations in the sand mine. And it's been developed in conversations and through conversations with Ibrahim Abdullah, who's a Sierra Leone historian, and he's a kind of social historian, so he deals with kind of labor movements and labor rights, particularly of young men. And a guy who works for the environmentalist group Green Scenery, that's Joseph Rahal. So anyway, whoops. So I'm going to try and sketch are the kind of measures and shifting edges of Freetown along or kind of through 4 parts. So first I'm going to outline the genealogy and dynamics of Freetown's urban extensions, tracing how, and this is work that you will probably be familiar with anyway, the colonial health segregation, and how this kind of connects to contemporary housing developments that rely on migrant labour and particular resource extraction. And these developments kind of push the city outward, displacing older livelihoods and reconfiguring new ones within these thresholds between the land and the sea. And in the second part, I'll present about 8-minute footage of a film, and that's footage that me and Edward captured in 2022. It's quite rough and raw, but it's trying to kind of follow the threads of these extensions through the labour that transforms the landscapes into raw building material. And so we move into the site of this sand mine. And the footage centres on 3 accounts: a middle-aged man who moved from the rural areas of Sierra Leone by a mining town called Lunsar, which is an iron ore mine, into the beach for employment. A local youth nearby who works at a beach resort, and he's kind of looking out at the mine, commenting on the kind of changes to the beach that are occurring. And then the sort of the kind of passage of trucks through the city. And then I will kind of look at the kind of expansion of that beyond the beach through these 2 diasporic bodies, shaped by the kind of human construction and its consequences. And then I'll address some of the crises that I think surface along this coastline, sedimented within this coastal urbanism of dredging, offshore energy, and island ecotourism. And so these kind of processes appear benign, so I'm critical of them, but they operate as a kind of what I'm calling this kind of colonial reflux, where segregation and exclusion become sedimented once again. So sorry, I'll just explain that. Self-explanatory, but yeah, this is downtown Freetown. Hill Station we'll start at, and then we'll move out to the beach area. And so what I'm going to embark on is a kind of short history of Hill Station and the health segregation. And, you know, people here in the Liverpool University know it much better than I, but it's good to kind of know it to kind of situate where I'm going with it. So, as we know, Freetown is a former kind of colonial mercantile town, and its deep water capabilities facilitated the trade of people and natural resources. So by 1792, the Creole descendants of freed African Americans, West Indians, and liberated African slaves had founded Freetown. Within 20 years, however, Sierra Leone was incorporated as part of the British Crown Colony. And so the city, as it was developed, it expanded in between the limits of its coastal edge and these hills, with these kind of 19th century timber housing, mainly built by liberated Creole slaves. So you can see kind of like the kind of language of that, or the kind of pattern of that in the kind of 19th century. And so together with kind of British colonial servants, Freetown demonstrated a sort of an uncommon level of racial and cultural tolerance in colonial Africa to a point. In 1899, the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, however, funded by the Liverpool-based Elder Dempster Shipping Company, conducted research on malaria in Freetown. Foreign experts attributed high European mortality rates to malaria transmitted by mosquitoes by locals. And so the research spurred the segregation of Freetown, leading to the British settlements relocating to Hill Station. And so, yeah, this is a variation of Ronald Ross's maps locating the breeding grounds of malaria around the Tower Hill military barracks, and then the development of this railway line to Hill Station. Sorry. And so this Hill Station was this settlement established 240 meters above the city. And the development of that site was between 1902 and 1904. And it was for me, it's a kind of one of these early architectural experiments in climate control. And the land at Hill Station was selected as viable for housing for British civil servants. It was cleared of forestry, and this protective buffer was created based on, quote, a width sufficient to defy the power of flight possessed by the average mosquito. And so the prefabricated homes at Hill Station were shipped from Liverpool, and we found some references to local contractors for the tender of that project, based just outside Liverpool, and they were elevated on steel pilates to reduce exposure to Sierra Leone's. Not entirely sure, but I knew the tender for it was from a Liverpudlian contractor called Rawlinson, just outside of Liverpool. I don't know exactly where the steel was, no. And so the building is lifted up to reduce exposure to the damp seasonal climate and harm it in dust. The ground surfaces were sealed with cement to minimize mosquito breeding pools. The north-facing open-plan bungalows facilitated airflow for cooling, while these monsoon staircases extended from the upper levels down to the street. So Hill Station distilled a sort of set of design principles that I and others have written about, believe it kind of shaped the modernist architecture that emerged across West Africa and the wider tropics. But it marked a kind of particular moment when colonial medical and architectural knowledge converged to disconnect buildings from the physical and social realities around them. But it set in motion this exclusive settlement pattern that drifted upwards into Freetown's hills, and less so outward along the coast, but upwards and out over the hills. And so it's kind of worth underscoring some of these material and spatial specifications of these bungalows, because they kind of outline the rejection of the local conditions and these other architectural parallels that I will just draw some attention to. So first, there was the rejection of the native material ground conditions. So the exposed red laterite, deeply rock was pitted. It's like vesicular. It's got like these little pools in it, and it's prone to holding small pools of water. And this was read through this medicalized lens as a threat. So that surface regularities, as I say, was ideal for breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And the guidelines recommended that this be broken up and or sealed beneath by a layer of concrete, effectively cutting off the building from the ground below. The elevation of the bungalow above the terrain in malaria districts, it was recommended that the bungalow be raised 15 feet above the ground on concrete pillars, anchored in Portland cement foundations. And in the archival documents, and this is features in the exhibit, you know, there was exchanges or ship, how would you say, sort of manifests or Portland cement sent from Liverpool to, yeah, Leyden, sorry, bills of Leyden. Thank you, Ola. So this elevation was framed as a kind of health measure, so the building above ground, and yet also enacted this material and spatial separation from the surrounding landscape. So this was the initial intention of the hill station, the area where the bungalows were. And to further limit malaria, those who were servants, let's call them servants, that's where they were, right, working for within the hill station, were permitted to work only during daylight hours, and the cultivation of open land within a buffer around hill station was prohibited, and the ruling was explicit. No native houses are allowed to be erected on the site. Professor Simpson, later Sir William Simpson, lecturer in tropical hygiene at the School of Tropical Medicine, reinforced this later during his visit to Freetown and to assess the kind of sanitary conditions. In his report, he wrote, quote, "Care should be taken that the boundaries of hill station are well defined so that they may not be encroached upon by native houses and thus defeat one of the objects for which it was built." And so an order in council issued on 31st of December 1910 recommended to subsequently extend the boundaries of Hill Station Reservation, further consolidating this exclusion. And this is an attempt at me trying to, there was boundary markers mentioned in the report. So this is Hill Station, but the recommendation was to start up at Leicester Peak. And so I tried to plot this other reservation. We can't say for certainty, some of we can, and there's a kind of conversation between myself and Ibrahim in Sierra Leone, and he's going to try and walk this, you know, and so, but anyway, it just goes to show you the kind of the extent of the kind of buffer that they hoped for. And so, as I say earlier on, Hill Station distilled a set of design principles that would later underpin what become known as tropical modernist architecture, and it has signaled a distinctive shift the moment when kind of prefabricated architecture was promoted as a new colonial building typology. And it offered several advantages from the colonial perspective. It produces structures that were easily transportable, quickly assembled. It ensured a building envelope that remained material detached from its site and surroundings, and it allowed for quality control through standardized metropolitan production. British architect Maxwell Fry, who later worked alongside Le Corbusier, and he worked on the 1945 plan for Freetown, and he wrote, he commented on European housing in Sierra Leone, and this is a quote. He goes, "West Africa's remoteness from the mainstreams of world communication is reflected in the backwardness of its European housing, where simple problems of sanitation, water, heating, cooking, ventilation, mosquito proofing, and so on have remained unsolved, nor would it appear for a lack of money, but knowledge." So I'm kind of just going to take a slight deviation off and kind of center some of these hill stations and some of these like kind of later developments, some of these other kind of more kind of conventional kind of or more familiar projects within the kind of international style. And so 20 years earlier, Corbusier and Buckminster Fuller had advanced the idea of the house as a machine for living. Fuller pursued this through this Dymaxion house. You can see it here on the top left-hand side. A lightweight prefab dwelling design for mass production and easy location. Le Corbusier translated the concept into his 5 points of modern architecture: raising building on pilates, adopting open plan interiors, separating structure from facade, introducing horizontal windows, and using roof gardens to recover lost ground. By 1945, the phrase had resurfaced in Maxwell Fry's town planning report, where prefab anti-miasma housing was promoted as the ideal model for Europeans. And so this logic has much earlier roots, I believe. In 1794, Karl Bernard Wedstrom, who was a central figure in the British abolitionist movement, in his essay on colonization, proposed an elevated house for white settlers, lifted above the ground to counter heat, dampness, and disease. Drawn loosely on raised dwellings, he observed along the West African coast, Wedstrom and Johansson's designs, and you can see these sketches here, or these designs. These are a set of drawings of many. developed for the comfort of Europeans in the tropics, became entangled with the early formation of the Sierra Leone colony and foreshadowed the prefabricated hygienic colonial typologies that followed. Vedstrom described the treehouse as follows, quote, "A tree of proper size and form should be topped and cut so as to form a central spindle, leaving at least two supporting shoulders, one above the other, so that the house may, when necessary, be moved around to suit the aspect of the different seasons. In principle, this device closely anticipates Buckminster Fuller's later Dymaxion house, a prefab dwelling designed for rotation, climatic adjustment, and ease of assembly. Vedstrom noted that the design of his elevated house was in fact the invention of the Swede Andrew Johansson, who modelled its raised structure on existing West African coastal dwellings, what he referred to as, quote, Negro housing, end quote. So, although Vedstrom and Johansson's designs were conceived for the comfort of European settlers in a generalised tropical environment, they became closely tied to the early formation of the Sierra Leone colony. According to documents assembled by Vedstrom, the Sierra Leone Company, incorporated in 1790, arranged for houses to be pre-framed in England and shipped to West Africa. In 1792, the ship York arrived at Freetown, carrying these structural frames intended for the Nova Scotian settlers. After considerable difficulty, unloading the cargo, the materials were used to construct a church, a warehouse, a range of shops, and 4 canvas painted houses of oilcloth manufactured in Knightsbridge. So, although Vedstrom and Johansson's designs were conceived for the comfort of European settlers in a generalised tropical environment, they became closely tied to the early formation of the Sierra Leone colony. So these early experiments in prefab and elevated dwellings established a broader architectural logic for colonial settlement, housing that was lifted above the ground, materially insulated from its surroundings, and conceived as a hygienic enclosure for European life. This logic soon scaled up from individual buildings to an urban pattern, shaping the exclusive outward growth of Freetown. As Anthony King notes, the hill station, quote, functioned not simply as a resort, but provided the closest approximation to conditions of life at home, end quote. In this way, Hill Station crystallized a model of urbanism and architecture that structured the city's expansion into the hills and along the coast. So today, these are some of the homes today. And again, I know that you've done quite a bit of research on them. Today, local Sierra Leonean civil servants occupy the residences of these hill stations, yet the imprint of the British masters, the divided vision of urban space sort of remains visible. The colonial ambition to reshape non-European areas into essentially European constructs was a far-reaching pathological condition. And I, as others, such as Ibrahim, argue this vision produced an exclusive architecture and settlement pattern, initiating this urbanizing drift upwards into Freetown's hills. And so today, this exclusive housing paradigm competes for Freetown's hilltops, clearing forests to access granite deposits mixed with beach sand. This growth disrupts local ecologies, exploits youth and migrant labour, and increases stormwater runoff and soil erosion, with cascading effects on coastal communities. Recent crises, including cholera in 2012, Ebola in 2014, and a devastating mudslide in 2017, have amplified these vulnerabilities, causing significant loss of life and displacement. Freetown's infrastructural arteries are clogged with debris and solid waste, and they struggle to channel rainwater effectively, and yet the sand continues to flow through the city. But just to show you, this is up by towards Leicester Peak, further up from Hill Station. This is Crew Bay, and it lies at the kind of confluence or on the estuary of where the river flows out. So the stormwater is increased, and during the rainy season, they are kind of receiving the full effects of it downhill. And this is the landslide in 2017, or an image of it up by Sugarloaf, just not far from here. So sand is the second most exploited natural resource on the planet after water. Tentacles of sand thread through urban Freetown, spilling from juggernaut trucks onto roads, feeding the construction of new houses. These tentacles trace the scale, intricacy, and indeterminacy of Freetown and its sprawling extensions. But like sand itself, the city's urbanism remains elusive and hard to grasp. So now, this was Hill Station. This is the Freetown, the kind of growth out along the peninsula, and this is John O'Bay Beach. So following these tentacles of sand leads to this larger roadside accumulations of sand that are sold on or mixed with cement and poured into the frame of a new home. Travelling further into Freetown's surrounds, these tentacles invariably lead to the coastally main source of a beach. This beach in particular is called John O'Bay. It's not publicly accessible. It's controlled by a local chief and community. Only those in trucks that pay a levy to extract sand can come and go. And so in April 2022, myself and Edward had gained permission and get access to the beach to observe sand mining and to speak to some of the labourers involved. And I'll just show you an 8-minute clip of that, if that's okay.
Audio. Is there audio as well? Do you need audio?
There's a bit of audio on it, but it's up. I think we tested it. Breaking it down into different sizes of aggregate. Yeah, it's on the coastal road from Freetown to John O'Bay. That location exactly.
How about it?
In our country, we labor very hard. You have machines, you have equipment.
Can you talk all the time for two?
Yes.
I understand you're working.
Yes, I'm now working now.
No, we don't use your face. No.
Well, for today is the 6 hour. When the water came in, it's 6 hour. It go is 6 hour. Sometimes it can be 4 or 5 trucks. All of we, all year, people are coming different sides to find the daily bread. Now I stay here I came here from at the time in year 2016 I came here. System had changed. At that time I came here, is a many sand in this place, but now the sand is already finished.
Now motorcar don't win award. Motorcar I win award. You don't win award. You motorcar. Fine, eh?
Yeah.
This motorcar is good. Good vehicle.
Well, now we are looking at the sea and the sand and all the rocks. The beach have been changed because of the sand mining that is happening in Janubi. Before it was okay, but now it's worse because they are doing the sand mining every day, morning, night, daytime, every day they are doing it. Now you go there now, there is not too much of sand anymore. You will see so many granites, the black sand is coming out now because there is no more brown sand anymore. Also, they have their cemetery alongside the beach highway, opposite going to Janubi. Also, because of this sand mining, also most of the crops have been wiped away. Even if you take a walk along the beach going to Janubi, you will see some of these bones of human beings. That is, the water have been wiped away from the cemetery.
This is Uncle Paul, a beach resort just further on the coast. What was that? Wow, look at me playing.
I don't think
I really like that. Can you give me a copy of that?
I don't for this.
No, not. We're just going to just finish
up
it.
to this.
Yeah. We're just going to. I'm going to just try and wrap this up. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, you were asking, Ola.
Yeah, where is it?
That's the beach, but
Uh-huh.
all the way
That's
along the
the
road you'll see. And,
Those
you know, those that are artisanal mining of the granite, you just see everywhere, but the sand is in very kind of focused concentrations and at a much larger scale. Yeah. So sorry. So as I was saying, so this is um, you know, the kind of sand mining is the implications of it are huge: coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion, loss of fishing livelihoods, and the degradation of marine habitats. And the irony being stark is that Sierra Leone's beaches are one of its strongest economic assets for vital for tourism, and they're being stripped away. And so what you're seeing here is just an aerial view of what I was saying in 2013. So this was John Bay. This was the tourist resort that we was looking up here, and this is it in 2022. Yeah. So, but it's not simply the growth, it's the expansion of this sort of, you know, kind of emergent coastal urbanism in which lives are also intertidal. You know, they're shaped daily by the rhythm of the low tides. Sorry, I had the mic down, I didn't realize. And these new forms of housing patterns, of ownership and belonging, emerging enterprises, multi-religious spaces, yeah, and ongoing territorial contestations are taking place. So yeah, that footage was that is it again in 2013, and I should have the next image of it now. Yeah, so that's what's coming out in there. Yeah. So and this is likely part of a much larger emergent coastal urbanism, you know, where sand and cement combine. This is tied to the circulation and consumption of cement along the West African coastal corridor, and this is the work of okay, of Ermel Shocklin. You're welcome. A 500 kilometer conurbation. This is being recorded anyway, isn't it? Stretching from Accra through. So this is from the book of Ermel Shocklin. So the largest urban metropolis still in formation in Africa. And so I'd like to bring into this understanding of coastal urbanism other bodies that extend inside and outside the frame of John O'Bay. Some are transoceanic and non-human, others are human and diasporic. So firstly, the kind of seasonal arrival of these large deposits of sargassum algae on Sierra Leone's beaches, and they're driven in part by these shifting ocean currents, climate change, nutrient runoff from farming, and this is kind of consequences for artisanal fishermen, choking engines and nets, yeah. And this phenomenon is linked to the kind of consumption of intensive soybean farming also in the Congo, yeah. Amazon and the Mississippi, and releases nitrogen and phosphorus into the ocean. These sargassum bodies originate 7,000 kilometers away in the Caribbean, and yeah, and they're moved by these equatorial countercurrents. So I mean, they're the kind of the trade winds and the return, yeah, and they're resisting this east-west trade winds that once facilitated the transportation of slaves. So this is, however, is not a form of restitution. It's in the wrong direction, you know. But this is like every year this arrives up on the beach, and it's the main beach down by Lumley. And this is the sort of second diaspora. This is a Sierra Leonean man that we know who's come from the US. His name is Fode, and Fode was sent to live with his aunt during the Sierra Leonean Civil War in 1994, and eventually became homeless in Portland, Oregon. And there he met his wife Heather, had a daughter, and in 2010 he got into a fight defending an Eritrean woman in a bar, and he was detained by ICE for deportation, but lack of proof of citizenship from both Sierra Leone and the USA because all the records were destroyed. So in 2017, under the Trump administration, he was labeled which Trump, you know, Sierra Leone was labeled a recalcitrant country, and it complicated his removal. So in March 2018, they seized Fode, and he was forcibly deported, and he ended up on John O'Bay Beach working because that's where the money is, yeah. And so he's driving one of the sand trucks. And so this work is really, really physically demanding. It's really quite horrible. It's really physically demanding work. A lot of the laborers are in pain, just, you know, and because of the physical labor and the wetness in their hands and pushing hard all day. And a lot of them are taking opioids just to kind of numb the pain. So there's this sort of this whole bad ecology at work here. So for the but the beach is not really a site of upward mobility. It's a kind of space of confinement anyway for Fode. And this exists along increasing vessel traffic through Freetown Port. So Hill Station being up here. Much of it linked to Petville Harbour, which is further out there, which is the main exit for Sierra Leone's iron ore that connects to Lunsar. And dredging is deep into harbour for larger ships, accelerating trade and the extraction of sand. So, and here you can see this is some of the Petville is out there, and they're planning to expand it. Just beyond Petville is Ponce Island, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so this is the planned dredging channels here, and these are large spoil grounds where they dredge and then dump all the deposits there. So these spoil grounds, so there's 2 offshore sites have been nominated as spoil grounds to receive material from capital maintenance dredging campaigns. 2 offshore sites, as I say, have been nominated, and these spoil grounds have significant environmental issues. Possibly, as these spoil grounds have related to habitat destruction, increased water turbidity, the mobilization of contaminants, and changes to the hydrology. And then you have the Freetown Port is dredged to handle these larger vessels. It's reliant on these offshore energy. This is one of these Turkish car power ships. Yeah, there's 2 of them. I think there was 2 of them. There's now just 1. And so it's, so Sierra Leone is sort of paradoxically integrated into this kind of circulation. So there's one, as I say, there's 1 car power ship in Freetown, and it provides like a supply of 5.6 megawatts. And recently there's a proposed deep water, sorry, it's all bad news. Seems like it.
Yeah, thank you.
A proposed deep water fishing port near Jono Bay, backed by Chinese interests, and it's threatening Black Johnson, which is another smaller beach community up the road. It's vital for fish and sea turtles. And lastly, so there's Idris Elba's, Afro-dynamic eco-city, yeah, on Chevreau Island, which is just further out. And it's presented this forward-looking retreat of sprawling coastlines and infrastructures. There's an academic, Milo Go, I think he wrote about it. He's in University of Manchester, and he talks about it mirroring the historical patterns of, these sort of enclaves of privilege. And so, anyway, so like where I am with the research, I've been...
Except that it's Idris Elba's eco.
Yeah, he's back this year. Yeah, it's a large island further down off the coast of the peninsula. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm just going to like talk about some of the close with some of the musings and the thoughts of kind of where I am with the project. So it's something to do with these ideas of the compound, this colonial genealogy of these leisure architectures, but this idea of drift, the kind of material drift, but the kind of methods of drift through walking, filming, and drawing. And so it's kind of to do with, exploring how these kind of behaviors and social relations, are kind of tease out this new understanding of these urbanisms. And so some of the questions that are, I'm kind of like asking are, how does Freetown's extensions through these drifts, what is this kind of new type of urbanism that's kind of emerging between the land and the sea? What is this a kind of new life that is emerging there? These self-determination, these kind of new contested areas, yeah. And what does it tell us kind of about the kind of coast, the memory and its urban future? And I'm particularly interested in this idea of drift, and this comes from kind of Guy Debord, but just as a sort of an embodied practice, and it's sort of, hopefully, it's like neither transient nor extractive, yeah. And so the exhibition at Reba was the start of this. It started out with the beach, but I had to get to the beach through this project, and it's part of this ongoing questioning. And it allows me to think through these questions through this kind of project. And the plan is, to kind of, initially this plan was to make this model the model is in Reba that was cast that could be kind of continually remade. So the idea is to kind of develop this idea further, to take this model, this large landscape model, and talking about the materiality of it as a kind of just as a device to kind of communicate with on the beach, or in these places. And so really ultimately the kind of project is about questioning these, how might we design for these contexts where these coastal ecologies, labor and urbanization are become entangled. So that's where I am with the work. Yeah.